Oh, we're starting. Okay. Welcome to Iowa. Iowa is known not just for its football, but its deep farming roots, its Midwestern roots. Today, I'm going to take you on the journey of telling you the process of farming in Iowa. First of all, farming is not all just about looking good, wearing cowboy boots, and driving around trucks. It is more than just that. First, we're going to start off with where it all begins in farming. First, we're going to start off with soil preparation. Now, before you plant the seed in the ground and harvest and all that fun stuff, first you have to get the soil prepared for the seed. That involves tillage and stuff like that, like V-ripping, like that picture, tilling like field cultivators and disking right here to get the ground all nice and soft to plant the ground. First of all, in this first picture is a V-ripper. What this does is it kind of rips up the ground, it's giant knives that go in the ground, rip it up. And then the second picture is kind of more where it goes over and it just kind of makes it all soft and nice for the planter to plant the seed in the ground. That's kind of the more boring part of farming, I guess. It's the first thing you do kind of right in the springtime. You don't really want to do it in the winter because the ground is frozen. Obviously, you put a knife in the ground, it's going to break it, but it's frozen, obviously. Also, another thing that goes into soil preparation is maybe around this time in the winter, they'll manure spread, and they'll rip up the ground and put the manure in and infuse it with the ground. So then next, we have fertilization, like I said. Fertilization, we got dry fertilizer and hydrous ammonia, and then, like I said, manure itself. This photo is kind of dry fertilizer. They put it in like spreaders and they go out. Co-ops usually do this, and they spread it along the ground. It's more of an older way of fertilizing your ground. The newer way is more like in hydrous ammonia, where it goes back to knifing into the ground. And hydrous ammonia is actually a very dangerous chemical. They say it is so cold it can burn you. I don't know how that works, but it just works. They don't suggest it getting on you. It could go into your lungs and stop you from breathing. I've actually had that happen to me once. It was not fun. They have these giant tanks and they hook up to the hoses. And like right now, it's so cold because it comes in contact with the oxygen in the air, and it makes kind of like a smoke. Yeah. And then my uncles usually do, they usually use anhydrous ammonia and manure because my uncles all have cattle lots and pigs and anhydrous ammonia. Dry fertilizer, like I said, is kind of like a thing of the past. No one really uses it anymore. They use it, but it's more like they put like lime. That right there is more like a combination of different chemicals. But like I said, it's kind of like an older style. Back when my grandpa actually used dry fertilizer because I didn't have the technology like anhydrous ammonia these days. The next should be planting itself. Planting usually happens in the springtime. Actually, will come up, I think, in April or May. They usually have a date that they set that after this date in Iowa, you can plant. I don't really know the exact date, but I know it's later in April, I want to say. This is kind of more of the kind of a boring part, probably more of the intellectual part of farming. It's pretty self-explanatory. Putting the seed in the ground, going around, and just planting your seeds. Planting also during the summertime. Ever heard like knee high by the 4th of July? Anybody? No? Okay. Usually that is the case. Usually by the 4th of July, the corn is as high as your knees. Now the beans, by the other hand, they're usually really small. They usually stay small. Corn is actually classified as a weed, gets really tall, and then beans they are classified as a bush. They just kind of grow outwards, but they do grow taller. Beans stay kind of smaller, but corn gets a lot taller. In the summer months, because it grows so high, they usually spray with airplanes and helicopters. When the corn is small, though, farmers like to go out by themselves and spray it with their machinery. But usually, farmers don't usually own planes. They usually have co-ops do this and custom farm and spray your ground. I don't know why I have a picture of pigs on there, but but yeah, planting, it's kind of self-explanatory. You just put the seed in the ground, it grows knee-high by the 4th of July. Usually around here, it's beans and corn. I don't really see anything else. no wheat or anything like that. That's weird. Next is harvesting. The one thing that everybody knows about harvesting usually takes place in late fall or kind of starting of fall, kind of like when the school season. The school season starts. Harvesting is pretty self-explanatory. It's you go out with your corn heads and your bean heads and you take your crops out of the field. My uncles, because they own so much livestock, what they usually do is they kind of split it right down the middle. Half their corn gets chopped up and then put into feed for their cattle because all their cattle is corn fed, grass fed cattle, two different things. Beans, they don't really feed their cows beans. It's just kind of how the world works. Corn fed is just a lot. It's all about just the food in general, the protein, just everything involved in the food itself. Harvesting doesn't really take that long. Harvesting is probably more of the fun part of farming. Like I said before, planting is more of the intellectual part where you actually have to put thought into it. Farming, you have to put thought into everything. Spraying, planting, a lot of thought and a lot of thinking that goes into farming. Just being a farmer doesn't mean just taking crops out of a field and feeding cattle. It's also being a mechanic. You got to work on your machinery. It's being just a vet, working on your animals, and then just being kind of a family man and just always thinking when you're harvesting, you got to think about your family back at home and how you put all this together into one day. Like I said here, you see here before, that's kind of like a grain cart. I drove one of those before. It's kind of fun. You get to chase people around and kind of go underneath the combine, and I got stuck many times with that. It's not fun when you get stuck. It's really greasy out there. And then, so harvesting, like I said, pretty self-explanatory. Iowa is actually the number one state in the United States that produces the most corn bushels. Second, I think, was Nebraska, and then third was Illinois. But Iowa is the true corn state. Yeah. So like we went over before, Iowa, the true corn state, the number one producer in corn. Iowa is not just known for its football. It's known for its deep Midwestern farming roots and its livestock. Thank you for coming with me along on this journey, and I hope you learned a lot, and I hope now after this presentation, you know and respect farmers like I do. Thank you.